So, hi everyone, and thank you for joining. This is our last public OpenScape meeting for this edition of OpenScape. So, thanks for being here. It's duly titled Screen Fatigue, and I think we titled that as a question much more than like an attempt to conceptualize the matter. So, I'm very happy to have been joined by three initiators of projects that kind of reflect on a post-pandemic situation, but also a post-traumatic situation, not just dealing with one. And I hope that this conversation would kind of help us also workshop where OpenScape wants to go in the future. So we're joined by some of the members of OpenScape. We're joined by our guests, which I will introduce right now. And I'm going to give a little bit of context on each of the projects and each of the people that are joining the conversation, but I want it to be as open and interactive as possible. So if you have a question, please feel free to join in whichever manner you want. So today we have Ant Hampton, Sondre Daguerre, and Yikai Cao joining us. And I'm going to kind of mention much more than bios why we are excited to have these people with us today. Sondre has been in the culture scene for around 20 years. She had initiated Espace HT in Beirut, and then she was the co-commissioner and co-curator of the Lebanese Pavilion in Venice Biennale. She also is part of the Saradab collection, and most recently, also she was the co-founder of Beirut Art Center. Sorry for forgetting that. I almost did. And now, most recently, she's the co-founder of Correspondance, an initiative that is of particular interest to the conversation today happening in Beirut. We will discuss the details of that in a bit. We have Ant Hampton also joining us. He's a live and theater artist. He's been active as an artist since 1999. And his work has dealt with the global, with the international. It has been translated into several languages. And most relevant to this conversation today, I feel, is a project that he co-founded, Showing Without Going, also referred to as the Atlas, which is a series of gestures and approaches that was published as part of this kind of reaction to the movement of everything going online post-pandemic. So we're going to have the chance to also think with the project rather than just describe it. And Yikai is joining us. He has been in education, marketing, and management for a long time, and later he initiated Thinker Studio, which is also a major stakeholder and partner in connecting with Southeast Asia Gender and Sexuality Residency, which is a residency that started online because of the pandemic, but now is a hybrid residency. And I feel like there's a lot to learn from the flexibility of the project that is shared by all three initiatives. And also, I would like to, I know you don't want to be put on the spot, Stefan, but Stefan is the reason why we're all having this conversation. 2 years ago, like I always say, 1 year ago, OpenScape, but it's been two, no? I think it's been two. Anyways, so he invited all of the OpenScape partners to kind of think about the potential of being together and coming together in a format that felt like a necessity, being online, but then OpenScape had to deal with a lot of changes where the borders opened again, cultural practitioners were circulating again, and everyone had these double lives and trying to think about what it means to be and react to the sector, like the sector of being live, the sector of being together. So I feel like I want to give it to you, Stefan, for a little bit to just maybe also share a few questions before we jump in with the guests and try to make it as fun as possible. Thanks for joining.
Yes, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Stefan. I've been doing this project with my colleague Cecile for a bit now, and of course with all our partners across the planet. This project was very important to me because only if we could do it together. I have this sense, or I had this sense, now maybe I lost it a little bit. I lost my faith in it, but it's the first time we have such a global trauma happening at the same time. Not only it's happening all over the planet, because it's might have happened before, it certainly has happened before, but it's the first time that it's happening at the same time, and we can comment on it at the same time, and we're all interconnected. And when I say I feel a bit skeptical, is that I was hoping that from this trauma we would rewrite it. I use the term traumaturgy, in the sense, how can we rewrite our practices? How can we be ready next time? Not in the sense of post-apocalyptic, but how can we develop practices that maybe would not be challenged by that? And then now clearly it's, I think the divide reappears, the divide that suddenly was blurred because, I mean, at least in appearances between, let's say, global north and global south, that we were all equal in our immobility, and now we resume the privilege that some of us, me included, have, and while the others are left behind. And so in that sense, that was the motto of OpenScape, and it is the motto of part of my life, for sure, as it is probably from other participants here. Regarding question, my big question is what's next? What's next, not only for us here, but what's next for performing arts? What's next for institutions, other art practitioners? And maybe this what's next is, I would say, the open door to you know, run away with what we had and see how we can plant it, something like this. That's maybe the question I wanted to plant in the ground now and send back to you, Rafat, and also Ikai, Sandra, and Ant, and anyone, actually.
Okay, awesome. So I think we can give a little bit of just space to see if either Sandra, Ikai, or Ant have like a quick intuitive response to Stefan, or I could also jump in and we can get to that. Does anyone want to add something before I start asking? Okay, I can jump in. Deal. So I feel almost by accident in the three invitations that we sent to the three of you, now we have three initiatives that deal with the planet in a completely different way. So we have the Showing Without Going Atlas is dealing with a very international set of participants that pitched into the project with their questions and urgencies, which is a little bit similar to the format of OpenScape. And then we have the Connecting with Southeast Asia is regional, like it is something that also is specific in how it wants to start. And then we have Correspondance, which is something that is local, but also acknowledging everything that is happening in the world. I feel like it is worth having that very like diagonal conversation of where you position yourself in that conversation. Like when we speak about climate, when we speak about mobility outside of just the pandemic, do your projects think about that? How do you tackle these situations? It doesn't need to be climate, but it's just an example that I have in relation to kind of on a planetary level. And I feel already on the Atlas, it is like there are seeds of that, and I feel like it could be interesting if you maybe throw in your 2 cents on it.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. Yeah, it's difficult to know exactly how to choose where to start there, because even when I'm talking about the Atlas and Showing Without Going myself, I have to balance it between the reasons why I initiated it with Caroline Bargnot in VD initially, and then what became of it once the other members of the working group came on board, including Shiva, who's here, which is great to see you. Hi. It was an amazing moment then, because different perspectives came in, obviously, from all these different places in the world: Bangalore, Shanghai, Nairobi, Latvia/New York. I mean, really, it was quite a fantastic multi and plural viewpoint there. And different people had different reasons why they were interested in exploring this theme of how to do liveness without necessarily traveling oneself. So how can you send live performance work, or how can you host it? How can you kind of act as a kind of an airport? I started using this term ironically because it's very often a lot about also trying to avoid air travel or simply not being able to do it in the first place. So yeah, I don't know. It is obviously, I mean, the interest is how to kind of, in a way, travel without traveling, how to stay global when what we think of as our global mobility is either challenged in the short term or in the long term. I mean, we all had different, also, I suppose, priorities there in terms of how we thought about it. For me, it was kind of interesting to think of the pandemic as a sort of rehearsal for something that I see as sadly inevitable going forward, that we're going to have more trouble like this, and because of different reasons, not least climate collapse, and of course the reasons for doing liveness in the first place can be as much about very often local practices, but the strategies for putting those things in place can be shared globally, right? So what one person in Hong Kong has discovered with their group can be shared as a tactic globally and then reproduced locally elsewhere. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm fumbling around a little bit, but maybe that is,
No, I think this is helpful. I think it's helpful to fumble around with this idea because I don't think there's this answer. Like we're not sure. Part of the excitement is that I think even with OpenScape, it started because of this desire to achieve something rather than the something itself, which is a trait that I feel very much in Showing Without Going, where it lends itself to like both accuracy and ambiguity at the same time. And I feel like this is just a very fertile place. This is why I felt like your approach to it specifically, and how you were also mentioning the partners and the questions of these partners and how they integrated in the Atlas was something interesting. Yeah, Stefan.
Yeah, I wanted to react to not only what Ant said, but also to maybe a broader perspective. But Ant is a good example because I think he's been working on formats that were showing without going compatible before this crisis. I'm not sure if it was for a climate perspective or for the format of it or for the fun of it, for the challenge of it. But I also noticed reaction is always kind of a training camp for action. So the first time we react and then we get ready, not that we will train necessarily, but that our mind gets ready to new formats, and our mind gets, so when we approach a project or when artists approach a project, then they already have this opening on something else. I remember as a producer during the beginning of COVID, we had to cancel all the live performances, and generously a lot of venues offered artists to do a video version or to do a digital version of the project. And in a way, it was perceived as a fair offer because they wanted to pay us and support us. At the same time, I think it puts the artists in a position to do something that they are not used to do. And at the same time, it's a bit unfair because then we have to do something that we didn't agree to get our money, let's say. But this open perspective, and I think artists are now considering this, the digital format. The use of the format can appear early in a project and then say, okay, actually, I could do this project like this, and it's quite exciting. But maybe, can you tell me if some of your projects that were terrible without you was it for climate purposes, or was it just for fun, or why did you pioneer like this?
No, it wasn't initially for climate purposes. It was for all sorts of reasons. I mean, I guess to be honest, it's always interested me to think like how can we make live work that's also kind of reproducible and recordable in a way. I mean, I grew up in my 20s being very jealous of my friends who are all electronic musicians who were making their work in their pajamas and then giving people CDs, and I was like having to lug heavy things to rehearsal spaces and motivate actors and stuff. And then once I'd done the work, it was all gone, and it was a bit like, where's the joy here? And so I dreamt always of some kind of format which could approximate this this miracle of the recorded format. But of course, that's quite oxymoronic. When we're talking about live work, we think of it in these ephemeral terms. But I've found that it doesn't need to be like that. I mean, I've worked a lot, like you say, Stefan, creating formats that can act as triggers for live things, and I continue to do that, both now for fun, if you want, as you say it, and for climate reasons. I mean, you know, my attitude to these things has changed over the years. I think there's other reasons as well, but what we wanted to do with the Atlas, for those who haven't had time to look into it yet, it is a working tool that's designed to be just, you know, useful for anybody who, especially I think for people who are sort of in this moment of like, oh, what are we supposed to do? Suddenly we can't move around. I don't feel like a digital artist. You know, there was a lot of these kind of panicky reactions in the pandemic, and we wanted to just pull together the formats that exist already, that different artists have employed, all the different approaches, the practical approaches. So it started as a way of cataloging them, bringing them together, not cataloging actual work by artists. We weren't trying to create a big exhaustive list of all the artists who we can think of, but more just the formats. And so that's what you find when you go on the Atlas. You've got these tabs that say approaches and considerations, and basically that's practice and theory. My idea was to start with the approaches, and the group was very clear right from the start that we should also compile the kind of more theoretical and ethical and political implications and considerations necessary for working like this, which are many, as you will see. So if you click on that, you get a lot of questions, a lot of spectrums of, you know, more or less, for example, responsibility to the audience if the audience is involved in a participatory relationship or something with the work. So there's kind of these non-binary sliders, as well as clear questions or even statements sometimes. So the idea there, just to finish a very brief overview of what the Atlas does, is you've got these two columns in a sense, and then a third working space opens up where you can kind of combine practice and theory and see what that gives. And either you're working with an idea that you already have for something as an artist or as a producer or host, or you're just surfing the thing and ideas come out of it. So you can sort of come into it from the outside or work out from the inside.
Thank you. I want to, like, in a way, I feel like it would be interesting to bring in that perspective and have like focus a little bit on correspondence as the other end of the spectrum, because there's what is happening with the Atlas is an invitation to use this toolbox that I also have questions about the future of that toolbox. But for the sake of the question, correspondence does things in an intentionally unrecorded, intimate, like an in-person manner, even though the founders of it live between two countries, like they live between Paris and Beirut. But now the way that it operates is that it's trying to decentralize in who organize these sessions. And the question of the international comes in from the polar opposite of my question about the online. And I feel like it's worth putting in a little bit of your view on this. Specifically, the Correspondance was not particularly a post-pandemic project. It was a responsive project after the Beirut blast, but actually pitches into the larger conversation that we're all trying to have about this future of practice in a post-pandemic world in all the meanings that it has, not just the virus. So, the floor is yours, Sandra.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, exactly. I was going to tell you that it's the question that I hear here when you're talking is about how we work after a post-pandemic, etc. From our side, we would say, how can we continue to work in a post-traumatic situation? But even the post-traumatic is not really suitable, because as you were saying, Correspondance is an initiative that started not after COVID, not after the economical and financial and political crisis that started actually in Lebanon in October 2019. So before COVID, let's say COVID was also something that an added trauma, let's say, but it was really after the blast in August 2020, where we felt as a group of artists and cultural practitioners in France, we wanted to find a way to continue to communicate and help our peers in Lebanon. Just by also, and the first thing is, how do you help? Also, you need to understand the needs. And the needs were not necessarily what we expected. It was not only, we need to leave Lebanon, or we need funds, etc., but it was really, we need to talk, exchange, communicate. I think this is where also COVID maybe impacted the fact that not only we were living a crisis, but also people, because of COVID for months, were very living, let's say, not meeting together as much as they would have before. So yes, so I was saying, what started really as an initiative to help and support our peers became more and more a kind of platform of exchange that we continue to think and rethink. So I go back to what Stéphane was saying, what's next? It's a question that we ask ourselves every 3 months or 4 months, because the situation keeps on evolving and it's not finished. I mean, we're still in a very complicated situation. So we felt like the most important thing today was to push these conversations in a very horizontal way. So where you have people, we came with questions we would ask ourselves, but we invite also people through the social media, etc., to propose subjects of that interest them to discuss with people, with more and with completely multidisciplinary. This is something I need to say also. We were not really, I mean, we had already conversations around cinema, around photography, around painting, so it's not about one specific discipline, but it's really about how can we continue to produce, how we can continue to work in a context, in a Lebanese context. So yes, our initiative is very grounded to the local.
And I think I'm keeping it in, on the side, the fact that I would like to also think about the output outside of the realm of recording. That's the question that I want to ask a little bit later, but I feel like there's an interesting segue with Yikai, what Yikai is producing, or at least proposing with the gender and sexuality residency. So when we were talking, by the way, for everyone that's watching this later, there are recordings individual with each of the guests that explain the projects in more detail. And now we're kind of having a head start with the deeper questions. So for a little bit of context, yesterday we were discussing the starting point of the gender and sexuality residency. And one of the things that you mentioned regarding the content is because it was something that is also very geopolitically relevant. So Taiwan was passing same-sex marriage, and you wanted to kind of ground that from a more regional perspective where it wasn't possible. So could you maybe speak a little bit about the online factor and the starting point, and how it's helping you mediate a sensitive topic, which is also it's international, but you're dealing with it from a regional perspective?
Yeah, I think connect with Southeast Asia, this idea really just came up with in the year of 2019 or 2020. It wasn't really packed into the idea or the concept or the theme of gender and sexuality. But a very interesting thing is also my own practice and what I really focus, or the artists who I also working with. Most of them are focusing on the theme or the title about gender and sexuality. In the 2019, it suddenly Taiwan just passed a law of the same-sex marriage. So it became kind of the big thing and big of the title, and a lot of the artists trying to, giving out the propose and trying to speak out loud about their works and what's their idea. No matter it's queering or the feminist, anything about related with that. And by the same time, in 2017 or 16, Taiwan has a very interesting policy called the New Thousand Policy, which means we're going to have the connection. Obviously, the government encourage us, especially in the economics or the culture and art, can have more related or the connection with Southeast Asia region. And because of my traveling experiences, I noticed a lot of artists or the artists that I met in the Southeast Asia region. Some of them also focus on gender and sexuality, this kind of issue and topics, make their works. But a lot of country or city has a censorship in the Southeast Asia region. So it kind of give me the ideas about how about Taiwan become kind of the hub, since we've already passed the law of same-sex marriage, and no matter the nudity of the issue of the sex and gender, this kind of the issue is there's no censorship here in Taiwan. What if I put everybody together in Taiwan and they can freely networking and trying to do the research and build up the relationship with different regions, artists, and focus on what they want to do, and this area can become the kind of hub. And turns out the pandemic happens, so I got to find a way to figure it out. I cannot really bring all of the artists from Southeast Asia to Taiwan, this area. So online has become one of the way that how we do with it. So what we do is also with one of the artists who I work with. He gave me some of the ideas. One of the ideas, he was working another artist from Australia, and they are doing the research together. And there's one day the Australian artist say, "Oh, I miss the temple culture in Taiwan." So this artist, he bring his phone and just doing mobile in the city and photo shooting everything, like the video and live streaming at the same time. See, oh, this is the temple, and what do you want to pray for? I can pray it for you. And it gave me kind of the ideas and the concept of this project. What if I put artists online? The space online can become one of the region. And this region, there's no censorship of it, actually. If we through talking or we through doing the networking online through Zoom or any kind of software, no one will come up here and say, hey, you can do this, you cannot say these words, you cannot do this, as long as we don't publish it. Because the main focus is doing the networking, doing the research and doing the communication, doing the idea exchange together. That's what the artists and what the art workers really dying for it, especially in the period of time of the pandemic. So that's how the whole project started. Yes.
Thanks. I think this is a good note to also probe a little. So when we were speaking, Ant, in our first conversation, you mentioned something to shift the conversation a little bit from mobility to coming together. And I thought that was something it was a beautiful shift in the conversation where we were no longer speaking about showing without going in the sense that we can't go somewhere, but actually it was an attempt or a modality to bring people together. And my question here kind of is a recording question first, and then we can talk a little bit about the modality. How important is it for you that any of this is recorded, like any of the outcomes of these are recorded or saved? Because even in like workshopping OpenScape conversations, we have had participants ask about this idea of recording, like why are we recording? What is the use? Keeping it, not keeping it, making it ephemeral. Where do you stand on this, in this notion of being live and the aspirations of the platform itself?
I must say that for me, generally, I don't have a strong kind of intuition to record things when they're live. Rather the opposite. Over the years, I've been very bad at documenting my own work because, well, until it became a bit easier, videoing shows just was such a drain and so boring and constantly fraught. I don't know how many tapes got tangled in DV players and things. I mean, it never seemed to work for me. So I've always been a bit allergic to it. But insofar as, I mean, conferences and things like that, it's not so much my field usually. I mean, this showing without going thing was obviously a departure from that, and I felt very lucky to have all the things put in place so that the launches, for example, had been recorded, because we've gone back to those and used them as useful resources. But I don't know, is this what you mean? I feel like you're getting towards something else that I haven't quite put my finger on. When you said in a conversation that we started working towards.
So I think that something that I wanted to bring up in the public conversation is when we were speaking about, I think I was asking you something about why you cared about these performances happening on a distance or remotely, or why was it important for you to send these unrehearsed scripts? And I think you brought up something from my practice that you were trying to make a point that also something that I do is bring people together in impossible situations. And I felt like it was an interesting observation about mobility for the sake, because when we speak about these projects, we are talking a lot about movement, right? Like, can we move, lockdown, etc. But the byproduct of these projects, and specifically with these three that we're, even four, including OpenScape, hasn't really, I mean, it starts from this desire to move, but in reality, it is about a desire to be together. And I feel like this intimacy, let's say in Correspondance, they clearly decided that they're not recording anything. In Connecting with Southeast Asia, there's this public journal that is an invitation to really be public. In Showing Without Going, it's really playing with this idea, like the atlas is very public, the gestures are there, you can decide to publish your collection, your little algorithm of intentions and gestures, but then we don't necessarily see the recorded project. So this is why I'm curious about what your position on that vis-a-vis the intimacy that is created.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's really important to understand that one thing that really kept us focused as a working group throughout the whole thing was to constantly remind ourselves that we were working towards liveness all the time. Mm-hmm. And we were constantly kind of needing to define that for each other. Like, you know, if something, it functions perfectly well in the flatness of a screen, in the frame of a screen, then really there's no need to make it live. But, you know, constantly asking ourselves, what can you only do with liveness? Like, what requires a live approach leads you to a place where questions of recording and everything are rather secondary, I think. Because there you're just, you know, you're talking about documentation or archiving, which yeah, you can also make something that's kind of that has a kind of embodied and interesting live presence. For example, if you were to record a conversation with binaural sound, then and then listen back to it in a space perhaps with a similar acoustic, that it can give something that can be nice. Or if you record a conversation between two people and then have those two people coming out of two little speakers on the table, that even that installation can produce a presence, however serious or comic that might be, that that does something in the here and now, that creates a sense of something happening. And but I think all that's contained really within the Atlas for us, because any of those formats point towards outcomes like that, and even some of the questions as well, I would think, some of the considerations.
I think part of my curiosity about that, and also the connection with Correspondance, although it sounds very oblique, is that I see Showing Without Going as a very infrastructural project, even though it has other sides. And this is like, I want to use that to jump into Sandra, and then like maybe this can also be a conversation, not just mediated by me, but I feel like, Sandra, one of my hunches about recording has a lot to do with funding. Like it has to do with this keeping tracks and traces of what is being done continuously, has to do with lending ourselves to a traditional form of institutional dependence, right? This is the grant. What did you do with it? This is it. In addition to, of course, the usual knowledge production. Where does Correspondance stand in that one, relationship with traditional institutions, and two, like the knowledge production that is cumulative? I know that you mentioned before that it's a very social project that is supposed to grow organically. How do you think of accumulation in a project like Correspondance? Or does it matter? Is it something that you think about?
I think for now, accumulation is really not the most important part of the project. Now I was concentrating on the aspect of the Salon Correspondance, so this conversation we're having, but just to say that this comes from other initiatives that we started with Correspondance, always in response to requests we received from peers, from other artists. So it's important to say, like, it's not accumulation, it's a reaction. For us, I mean, Correspondance, until now, we react. We start something, we look at it, we feel, okay, what is working, what's not working, what are the reactions of the people, and then we continue. And this is why and how we started the Salon Correspondance with a physical space in Beirut a year and a half after the beginning of Correspondance. So it's so this is why, I mean, I think we were quite lucky in a way, because we got a fund that I think was a kind of urgency fund. So people, you know, when after the blast, there were like more funds that were more accessible for Lebanon, etc. And I think that people didn't know exactly the context. So they needed the support and the expertise, let's say, of people from the art world in Lebanon that could use, but we had a complete freedom to use the money as we wanted, and as long. So just to give you I mean, we've been working on the same fund, which was not a big fund, but for already 3 years, because we don't have a lot really expenses. It's really, most of the time, it's really under like volunteering, etc. And the fees that we give is really in a way to support the local scene. So by their intervention in the so yes, so it's not about accumulating. And I just want to say something about the documenting. We raised this question, we thought about it. We thought maybe we should just not make it public. We don't want to make it public just for, it's not that we don't want, but we feel that because there are just close conversations with people who are here, who everybody's interacting, it would be weird to have some people, we don't have speakers versus a public in this conversation. Really, people are around the table, anyone can intervene when they want. So we feel like if we have like part of the public that's behind the screen, just listening, and the other interacting, it would create something unbalanced. And also, I think some people, because we also have like young artists that come, that feel like they have this freedom to talk during this salon, because it's not an institutional space. There is not maybe we would block them to talk as they would have liked if there is something related to recording public, etc. It might change again, but for now this is
Yikay, I think, how do you deal with that same issue, because there's a beautiful map on the website, by the way, the link is there. There's the relationship between the artists and the facilitators and the observers is something that also Sandra perhaps is something not similar, but it's in conversation with your peer-to-peer notion in correspondence. Do you want to speak a little bit about that, Ikai? Because I feel it is an important part of how this project is held, and kind of leads to the question on a more managerial note that I'm also curious to ask the three of you.
Yeah, the kind of system how we do is we encourage the two emerging young artists as a pair in a different field, like as a team. And this team, two of the artists probably from different field, maybe from the circus team field. One is from the choreography scene. But they do have a similarity, or they do focus on the gender and sexuality, this type of topic. And we pair them, one of the facilitator from different country or different city, trying to kind of guiding or maybe mentorship them in the whole process during the residency. And why we trying to build up this kind of a system or the way is they all from the different field. And even they, as a pair of the artists in Taiwan or in their own country, they rarely has barely has the experiences to have the conversation with each other. And since we pair them together, and with the other one as a mentorship, as a facilitator, has more experiences and trying to create more conversation and build up the relationship with each other, they will create a different kind of the opportunities in the future for them. And since we're talking about a documentary, we ask, I wouldn't say require, we kind of invite them to do the journal on our website. The reason we invite them to do the journal on the website instead of the video recording or recording any kind of the video way for their work, what we focus on is the whole process in the residency, how they see, how they think, how they feel, how they really, build up the relationship with each other, how they really found. This process is more important for us, especially in this project. And we also encourage artists, you can use any kind of a form for you to write down your journal. This journal can be, you can read it in the words, you can draw. If you're really good at the designing or drawing, you can draw it, it's fine. But this is also the other way, trying to create the artist to having a communication, maybe have a communication with the general public, because this web page is open to the general public. So we also kind of also open the comment space for the public. You can leave the comments, you can leave your thoughts or ideas for this journal. So this communication is not just only two-way, artist to artist or artist to facilitator. It's also trying to encourage the general public to having a conversation with them. So it's not about the archiving or trying to or it's not about to keep them something. It's trying to creating something different organically of the conversation instead, actually. And this also, I think during the pandemic, it also kind of using this way is kind of back to the 90s, the late of 90s, when the blog is really popular at that time. People always writing on a blog and will leave the comments. And this kind of conversation, you also give people or the artists, have time to digest, why these comments living this way and why your journal writing in that way. So it's not that digital, but we're also using the way of the digital to try and create the relationship of everyone. I mean, everyone includes the people in to read the journal or the artist. Yeah.
And regarding the kind of learning component with the observers, do you select them? Could you speak a little bit about that? Because that is also officially part of the map, which I found interesting. Like, it's an interesting layer that I feel also Sandra would find relatable a little bit with the general audience.
Yes. Okay. So we have the third character is observers. The observer, they get to choose which group of the artists they want to observe, and also they get a chance to write down their journal what they observe, like 1 page. And these artists, what we invite is really young. They probably just graduated from school like 1 year, within 3 years. And most interesting thing is all of them are not, I would say, they are not. They some of them born in Taiwan. Some of them are immigrants from the other countries, and they are all trying to become the artists, or they are just graduated from art school. So which means they also bring their own different culture. Like one of them is Hong Kongese, one is the mix of the Macau and the Filipino, and study in Taiwan. And as an observer, they get a chance also to using their own culture experiences to see and mix with the culture when they stay in Taiwan as an observer. So they can write out more different things as in their generation and in their perspective to see these artists and a facilitator, how they doing their works, how they doing their conversations. So for me, that is also encouraging even younger generations to has the rights or has the opportunities to speak something that what they want to do, they want to say. Yeah. So the purpose of the journal or the purpose of the character of the observer is more like this.
Okay. And do you
I
feel like,
have a
yeah,
question.
of course.
No, so
And
not
Stefan, yeah.
to understand exactly. You were saying you select, but is there a selection process, and what are the criteria to select these young artists?
You mean for all of the artists or the observers?
No, the young
All of
artists.
them. Okay, it's not selected. It's more like invited. So I do spend time to see or watch the shows or to see, okay, any of the artists who has this kind of the potential or the willing. Of course, I will ask them, do you have the willing? Do you want to join this program? There's a fee, but you can feel free to join this. It's there's no, I would say there's a responsibility, of course, to put out a journal or to participate of the meetings, the conversations. But what we're looking for is not about the work and the result of the production. It's about the whole process, how you really dip into this. Yeah.
Stefan, did you also have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. I had maybe a comment. It's I have to warn you, it's only half from thought, but I see a lot of, from our three guests, a lot of point to converge to a little idea in my mind. I have the impression that we have a form of fetishism as general population that comes with the medium or the different media we learn, and now we expect always the full version. We want the 3D holographic laser thing. But if we look back at performing arts, it was always recorded, but it was only recorded in writing. And then as soon as we start, not going to jump to the end when we do videos of performances, but even before, when we record the critique of a performance, when we have somebody, an academic, commenting on a thing, we start to develop this need for more. But as much as all the projects that are compended in the Atlas, Showing Without Going, I think from Euripides to Roswitha von Gandersheim, all those playwrights, it's a form of recorded thing. And maybe, it's not that we, of course, we have to reinvent the wheel all the time, but at the same time, we also, I don't know if we have this, it's really a necessity to have this super fine record, or maybe it's just we got used to that and we don't question what we need from the recording. And when you look at correspondences and as well as ICAI Connect with SEA, we see that the coming together is around the project, not around the recording of the project. as much as people would gather, take a text, distribute, assign roles and assign offstage roles, or just document the process. I think it's the coming together doesn't need all this technology in a way. I said half thought, sorry.
Okay, and
yeah, I maybe have something to add to this that I just remembered. When we first started working together, the Showing Without Going group, and I should just clarify, this was a brief moment when we worked. I mean, the atlas is now there, it's online and available for everyone, but this was 2 years ago, and the work is over, and the website is kind of fixed because, you know, there's no more resources to change it. But anyway, when we were coming together, we developed a kind of a little practice of checking in with each other in a nice way. Rather than kind of assembling like this on Zoom and saying, how's your day? I've been doing this and that. We did a thing where we made some audio recordings for each other, and we shared them in the group with an instruction for how they were to come out of a speaker. So, you know, generally you take a little Bluetooth speaker and you place it somewhere in the domestic setting that we can imagine is kind of the same, a possibility for everyone. So, you know, I came out of the shower one day. I think Shiva came from the balcony or by an open window. Oh, no, one day you were feeling poorly, so you asked to be placed under a blanket. And
from cupboards. Yeah. We had people coming out from cupboards.
Yes, cupboards, exactly. From behind the door. So, and we used an app that made a nice clear recording. And so we would have this kind of slightly uncanny sense of presence each time. But these were basically recordings. This is what I wanted to just kind of flag in a way, that, you know, we were using very basic means to do something different. And so in a way, I feel like when we're talking about screens or recordings or documentation or archiving or anything really to do with technology, and within this live field, usually it starts becoming interesting when we misbehave. I think when we use technology in ways that the creators did not mean us to use them in, like, you know, and that might be putting a piece of paper over an iPad, as the project I was describing to you, Rafat, you know, which with a piece of light, a little light behind the paper that helps you draw something. You know, all these things that, I mean, when I developed that app, you know, for a while, Apple were refusing to kind of okay it because it just felt like, you know, they were like, well, the app's not going to work if you put a piece of paper over the screen because you can't see anything. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point. And like, you wanted to kind of jam it in a way.
You know, you just reminded me of something that is equally uncanny, which is actually the screen fatigue, the real screen fatigue event happened with Shiva. I mean, based on like this, the project you just described reminded me of what Shiva had proposed for OpenScape, which is like the correspondence project, no? Which is also funny because we have correspondence on the call. Like, I mean, this is the triangle of truth. Do you want to speak about this? I know you're exhausted in the time zone, but Shiva, speak about the real screen fatigue.
So
and
when
also
we
it's very
started
much like this, like I also want to, like it really, this was the description, this is like a post-mortem description of your project, by the way. This like revolting against the machine, that felt like a great way to describe your project.
So as part of the OpenScape idea, each partner was bringing in a topic and we would kind of have a conversation around it. And at some point when we had to, when it was our turn, there was Monia and me who were having a conversation at some point, and we said, it has to be about, like we were all having these conversations around curation, but we never at any point actually connected with each other. So we would just have these meetings where we would be talking about these really interesting ideas, But at some point we'd be like, but who are these people that we're talking to? We don't know these people. So how do we actually get to know each other a little more outside of our work situation and have that one-on-one sort of connection in some way outside of the screen, outside of Zoom? And that's how the Dispatch project came about. It was a bit like Secret Santa. So the group did not know who was sending them a package, and we kind of facilitated the entire process. So for example, Rafat was sending it to Wolfram was sending it to me, I was sending it to Cecile, and that kind of chain went around. And it was very interesting. It was just about sharing your practice or anything that you wanted to share about where you were located at that point. And people, I mind you, people were not in places where they actually lived. They were also traveling. It was also right during the Christmas holidays. So people had given one address and then they said, hey, by the way, if the package comes a little later, then the address will change. So it became a little more about logistics. It also got really personal. People were actually trying to like talk to each other and get a little more personal facts about each other rather than being about just this screen interaction. And that was a side thing that kept happening during the entire OpenScape time, I think for about a period of about 3 or 4 months, though we had thought it would happen in 1 month and everyone's packages would reach. Packages have still not reached. We still don't know where some of them are. Some will never reach probably. But it just became this very interesting on the side, outside of the screen conversation that kept happening during OpenScape. And that kept there was a different kind of joy in it in some way. So yeah. That's mostly it. I don't know, Rafat, you can add to it.
No, I mean, like also this is Sandra, you would relate, like this was the same time where Liban Post was stopping the contract with the Post, and like we didn't know what the hell was going on. Anyway, so I feel like this project very clearly and simply reveals the politics of many places at once and reveals the also personal politics of everyone's desire to engage. And I feel like maybe I'm curious to hear a little bit about troubleshooting in these 3 projects. Maybe we can start with you, Sandra, because you talk a lot about the flexibility of the project and how it's been changing. What do you think Correspondance revealed about the city it's in, like mainly Beirut? And what would you, I know I asked, what did you think you wanted to do and couldn't work? You said nothing, but I want to ask you the same question again. Just to keep it on record. You're doing everything.
Very precautious and we go step by step and it's true. We didn't have any, I can't call it troubleshooting in a way that, again, it's always, and if we go step by step, it's always a reaction, a feeling, maybe it's more fine-tuning and trying to think of an idea of how to communicate, to make people communicate, exchange, and felt that maybe it was not exactly the right format, I would say, but you can't really talk about troubleshooting.
Okay, and I feel like in our conversation you were speaking about kind of the fact that the projects, and you also mentioned this right now, like it was very fleeting when this project was a collective, and now it stays more as a toolbox for whoever wants to use it. Do you feel like, would you have rather it continued as a collective project, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certainly a sense of wanting to continue somehow with the individuals involved, because I mean it was great, and I mean in some ways doing this is also a continuation because of the connection with Shiva, and certainly it's nice to kind of follow different people's practices and so on, but I mean it really is a group of individual artists and we're all on our way. It was never really about putting together a group for more activity afterwards. I think it was really like, let's do this mission. It's going to be useful now, especially at that moment. And I think everyone's probably using it for their own means. I mean, I'm doing workshops with it, introducing other people to it in different contexts. It's a really useful tool when talking about devices in performance especially. So I tend to use it in my kind of coaching work around that when it comes up. Or even, yeah, I mean, but for institutions also to think through things. So no, I don't think that there was any regrets necessarily about, you know, the kind of time limited aspect of it.
Would you say, like, is the reason like a funding reason, or is the reason just, or both, like, or an artist going their way?
Well, no, it was always planned like that. So we had funding for the development of it in that moment, but there was never any plan to take things further, except perhaps with the Théâtre de Vidy-Lausanne, who were the kind of original backers from it. I was kind of hoping that there was going to be a strand of their program that would remain afterwards, with a kind of tag of showing without going. There was like quite a lot of talk in the air about that, and I must say it's a little bit sad to me that hasn't materialized now. I mean, they've had a lot on their plate, including a new building, so that's a big thing to deal with, and very concrete, as opposed to this ephemeral these ephemeral questions of showing without going. But for me, it's a really, it does kind of reach forward, and I think that it's also what I'm hoping now is that actually more and more people could think in terms of venues and arts organizations to dedicate a strand of their program to this kind of work, because it's not just compromise work, it's not just solutions to problems. It is interesting in its own right, and expands the field and makes one think more about work which is I mean, it's just so huge. Like the formats are so varied, it's very difficult to kind of talk about what it can or can't do in simple ways. But I do think that what I would love, for example, my dream would be that really like to have a venue that only presents work by live performance artists who are not there, who don't travel, who that only hosts work, international work from other countries, but by artists who you never see. You just see the result of their work. Yeah,
and with basically the participants, that's what you're talking about. So participants would enter, and instead of being audience.
Participatory work is a big part of. I mean, if you click on those kind of tags or hashtags or whatever in the atlas, you'll see that a large percentage of the formats are tagged in that way. But there's many other things as well, like Stefan is working on with Royce, with these sort of holograms and things. He can send a show. I mean, I don't think that's actually traveling without technicians, is it? But one day
it is.
Oh, yeah?
It
okay.
is. We did it, and it's horrible. It's a nightmare. But we did it twice. We sent it to Seoul, and we sent it to Taipei. And it's more expensive because you have to coach every. It's maybe sometimes technology it's too much, right? But we did.
So you're not quite with R2D2 kind of presenting Princess Leia? No,
not yet. I think it's in a few more episodes.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's these different kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be about participation in that sense, although I would argue that even as a kind of an audience in the dark, the best work draws them into a role of participation. Yeah, I mean, I think the questions continue. So in some ways, the project is still alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yikai, in your case, it's more managed, right? Like it's more formal in how it runs. So you've had 1.0, 2.0, and the shift was from online to online hybrid. Would you say that there are any particular learnings that would be useful to share with this particular group?
Well, I wanted to give some response with Ant just mentioned about the venue that he was streaming. He's streaming about with the space and just only the artists doing the live stream and the live works, and then the international artists were not there. It's just the audience coming. In Connect with Southeast Asia in 2023, our kind of the presentation in the end, we try to do that. Yeah, in our theater, I invite the other cities of artists doing their like a 50 minutes presentation, just any way, any form. You can do the lecture performances, you can do dance, you can do pre-recorded, anything. And we're presenting my theater, Thinkers Theater, and then we're screening that. And we're also doing the live streaming online at the same time. And I wasn't expect there's any other audiences from Taiwan will come. But at the end, we do it 2 days in a row, and eventually, like on site of the audiences in total, like 30 to 40. I mean, 2 days. But it's kind of at the end of the pandemic, people still want to come out and watch they didn't even know who these artists are. They just watch and read their journal, and they just came for like 15 minutes. And for me, that was really beautiful. Yeah. And they also make me continue in doing this project this year, and also planning for the next year. What we're doing is trying to really keep the the connection online in the first stage for the two artists. But I was shrinking down, not that many artists at the same time, because it's really hard to manage like 8 artists at the same time, 5 weeks. It's just too much for me and my team. And of course, we also have the other team working with us from Singapore and Philippines, but it's just a lot actually. So we will focus like 1 to 2 team of artists. They were doing the online kind of the connection at first for like 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe longer if they need. And then we were doing the exchange residency for each countries. But this will kind of based on the relationship that they have in the first and the second year in this project's artists. So they will kind of developing the whole project and the program that we did before. Yes. And this year we sent one of the artists to Singapore to really meet one of the artists that in this project. And I think what I noticed and what I found is because they do had a kind of relationship built online before, so they know each other a little bit more. So it's kind of speed up for them to collaborate and trying to cooperate on site when they really meet each other. You know, the conversation really kind of can get into the situation for their work and maybe they're going to do in the future. So which means I think for the combination of the 2 way of online and on-site as a residency or kind of cooperation is quite open for me in the future, any form we can think about it. Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like maybe we could open it up a little bit to the OpenScape partners to reflect a little bit on the past couple of years. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but I think it would be interesting to have someone share with our guests to a little bit of what our concerns were in a way and what we're thinking about, especially moving forward. So, I mean, I can call everyone out by name, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah, sure, Florencia.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, just thank you so much for bringing up this conversation that I believe it was absolutely necessary. I love it when we have the chance to look back on our perspective and just to see how we've been working all during these 3 years of this weird evolution of the pandemic. And I just couldn't help but remember this this movement that we had here in Chile afterwards, actually before 2020 and 2019, we had this big social explosion. I don't know if you ever heard about it. It was like a big political and social issue we had going on, and we had manifestations for about 2 or 3 months before the pandemic. So like the artistic and cultural context was very hard. And so this movement came along, and it was called the Female Network, no, the Female Dancers Network. So it was like the first time, and then eventually it became like this female and diversity network, but like dance workers mostly. And we actually even like ended up adding this neutral pronoun. So we had like this weird spelling of our name, and it was very hard for the media or for anyone to pronounce us. It was very interesting, but we kept sharing and meeting for about 2 years during the pandemic. And we had this kind of commissions. So we had like this communications commissions around the network. And we had this foreign relationships commission, and there were the workers that will meet with the ministry. And we had like all this kind of commissions, and we ended up having this great show that we put together for about like 20 or 30 dancers to dance. And we were all in this project, and we would also help each other when it came to economic needs, because we had like a very rough period, because of this social explosion, and then because of the pandemic. So it was like so important for us to keep together and to keep being connected towards these years. And after the pandemic kind of finished and masks went off and everything, we just stopped meeting each other, just like immediately stopped. And all this network we had and all this work we had, and actually we had this dance video that we presented, and it was, as I was saying, like this great show that put together 30 dancers, and all that just is gone now. So I think it's I can't help but thinking about that, and I think it's just so interesting that, for example, OpenScape itself has thrived somehow, and we have kept going on, and we have kept just thinking about issues to discuss, because we just never end up, thinking about things and just wanted to discuss ideas. And I feel always so much like willing to get to know other people's experiences around the same subjects. I mean, how do things work in the different countries that somehow integrate this platform? So I just brought up that example to probably appreciate the fact that I believe it's very hard after the pandemic, all the rhythm that life has just started to have, and we have kept meeting. I believe it's just so interesting. So this conversation definitely helps me to think about that and to appreciate that.
Thank you. It's a very interesting example, actually, like the fact that the real life stopped after real life could start. I mean, it's cynical, but it's very interesting. And also, yeah, it makes me think about these, showing without going, not on the same dramatic aspect of stopping, but the fact that these things exist for a reason. And also, this is a question for correspondence, where like when we focus exactly on response and then something happens, even though like with your practice have been in live work for a long time, but the bringing together of these people to come and create this project happened around the same time, where you were also responding to something that is global, like a major event. I feel like when we think about continuity or sustainability, which are things that are dropped as a big part of every conversation about projects, what are the nuances of that? Like, also Yikai, with your project, where you're thinking that gender and sexuality started because of a specific event, moving forward, would it still carry the same topic? Is it something that you feel is necessary outside of the realm of speaking about sustainability, right? Just as a big goal. This is an open question for everyone, but I think Florencia brought up something interesting from a very like body perspective about when things stop and then you wonder why they stop, but sometimes there's a very natural reason. So I don't know who wants to pick that up, but
Okay, on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a very clear answer prepared or anything, but I do feel that whenever these questions come up of projects where there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of good intentions, and certainly the sustainability word, when that kind of starts floating around a lot, I wonder like where accountability goes when, like if every time somebody used the word sustainability, they had to kind of account for it at some point later on, I wonder whether people would use it so freely, The fact that it's so hard to kind of measure one's kind of sustainable impact, or which is actually what we mean by that is lack of impact usually, because it's about doing less. The fact that's so difficult to measure anyway means that it's sort of easier to start using these words. And yeah, I mean, to begin with, Showing Without Going, honestly, it started as a provocation to Goethe Institute on request from somebody in the Rio office in Brazil, who was having a meeting of the South American offices, and they asked me to write a little manifesto about how we might start to think about like different models of live performance, and I wrote a thing that basically was like, surely we're now at the end of the period where it's okay to kind of flaunt enormous productions in the name of kind of soft power and the cultural diplomacy in that way, huge festivals needing somehow the flagship show from Germany or Switzerland or France, and those cultural institutions like Alliance Française, Goethe Institute, Pro Helvetia, used to be British Council, but I think we can strike them off the list now. These huge organizations needing something big and flashy that costs a lot of money and involves tons of people coming in on planes, taking taxis into the center of town, moving between hotel and show, as soon as it's finished, jetting back out again. It's like, can we please agree that this era, like that has to stop now? Like, and these kinds of things, or you can account for them. Like we can go to these institutions and say, please, like, give us the statistics now. Like how many air miles have been reduced? Like, what is the carbon footprint now of your operations? These are the big, powerful organizations or linked to governments with very clear aims per year. So there, I feel like accountability there may be a route for it. I don't know. I mean, solid impact statistics, how to quantify things, is all very unpopular in the arts. It's not a cool thing to bring to the table usually. But I think with these kinds of subjects, it's kind of time to get a little bit more precise.
That's interesting. Sandra, Yikai, Stefan, we have a hand.
Yeah, I just maybe not directly responding to Ant's intervention, but I guess there's a very clear thing to me that we have networks of solidarity and we have networks of necessity. And I mean, the difference, maybe network solidarity would be a positive reaction to an external crisis, external challenge, and it moves to necessity when it affects you directly. And as soon as it moves away from you, then you have the choice to show solidarity or not. And after a while, we get a bit, we tend to forget, or I'm looking for. We don't feel it that strong. So that's strong. So that's this movement. Yeah, when you are in a privileged position, then it flows and washes out, and when it's out of necessity, then you act upon it. And that's the question not only about climate, but I guess global solidarity in terms of social and political dimension is really what should motivate us the most. And Rafat seems frozen, so that's the Lebanese power grid. Yeah. No, Rafat, no.
Yeah.
Briefly back and not. Yeah, sorry, I've said, but I wanted to say. So maybe we can follow up on. Rafat is back.
I think, sorry, it's very interesting what you just said, Stefan, because I relate really with the initiative of Correspondance, because yes, we generally started it as an initiative of solidarity, but very quickly it became an initiative of necessity for us also. It's not, and this is why we always insist on this idea of peer-to-peer platform, etc., because we do need this platform as much as people in Lebanon, as much as the people who are contacting us. Because in every situation of a crisis, it pushes us to stop and think and rethink. And I talked about it with Rafat in our interview. I think in Lebanon, the context was very, it's not COVID, it's more, let's say, the financial, political, and economical crisis that pushed us to stop and wake up also, I think, of a specific, a situation that was in the outward, in Lebanon in general, but also very specifically in the outward. And I think this moment that we have now to just continue to think, rethink, re-question, because we are still in the crisis. It's not, this is where I'm saying it's different. Okay, COVID, maybe you can have this feeling that, okay, we had, there was the COVID crisis and now things are back to normal, let's say. We don't have normality in Lebanon. It's I think, and so it's important to use this time and continue. And I'm saying Correspondance for me is a work in progress, is an initiative in progress. It's still, and it is very important to use this time as you have been using it, I think also in OpenScape. And maybe if the problematic is not COVID anymore, there are many other issues, and it's important to take the time to talk about it. And I think this is what maybe COVID taught us in a way, is that we can use the time and take the time to stop and think and share.
Yeah, Shiva?
So I just wanted to say something very quickly that in a strange way, working online on different projects that, one has worked on, or different networks that one has been part of, I think it just made it easier to have the messy conversations. So whether it was conversations about, say, monies, it was about just something really simple as what time will a meeting happen, which one never considers otherwise, because you're now working with people from different time zones and you have to find that common time. And it took us a while. It did take us a while, but we've managed to find a timing, which sometimes works for people, sometimes doesn't work. But, and these are considerations that you make for other people and you actually care for them, which sometimes in a working relationship when you're working in person doesn't happen. And we are allowing that to happen in this scenario, which is huge. It's absolutely huge. And to be able to talk about money, to be able to ask about who's getting paid how much, to have that kind of transparency, whether it was in Showing Without Going or whether it's in OpenScape, I feel that's been a very interesting aspect of working internationally at some level in forums like this. So there is obviously the screen fatigue aspect, etc. But I feel like in some ways, the conversations which we shy away from and we find it messy to do were easier in some form. And I think it's also because of the people who were running it probably, but I think it was allowed for. And people felt like you were on an equal platform to have those conversations. Yeah, just.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with Shiva. At the first of this meeting, and Zhihan, I know whether Zhihan is still online or not, we're just talking in Mandarin to say we haven't met each other for a while, and what we're talking about is it's not possible for him to come to Taiwan, and it's not possible for me as a Taiwanese needs to go to China at this moment because next year is an election. But it's great that we have the time to meet up here. And we haven't met each other for a long time. Yeah, but in the sense of the the way we are friends and we know each other for several years already. So that's kind of an interesting, moment online, and then it's kind of beautiful actually. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I just add something with Ikai. Ikai Shankar said hello to you, because when you're sharing, you said on the internet is no censorship, but you forget someone can stop you to get online. So, Shankar now tonight is working on how to connect with Zoom for more than 1 hour, because she's still working on it, because we don't know why Shalka's computer cannot connect to Zoom tonight, but I can. So I don't know what happened, but yeah, just sometimes just happen in mainland China. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's very nice to see you online here. But yeah, I want to say a little about the online situation here. Maybe I can share with you in China, because I think in mainland China the situation is a little bit different, maybe compared with another area, because the pandemic seems start suddenly in one night, so everyone go out. It's totally free. So it's quite interesting that. And in this year, the 1st of May, in mainland China, we have about 1 week vacation. So it's like the national vacation. It's a first long vacation in 3 years pandemic. So in that day, it's very weird if you look at the news all around the world, because the 1st of May is a Liberatory Day, or all the people around the world go to the street to fighting for their rights or something. But in China, everyone go out for shopping and traveling. It's very happy. But the weird thing is everyone knows in that week, if you go out, but you can image in 1 week, it's more than about 240 million people will travel in one week in one countries. So you're 100% sure that if you go out, you'll be suffered. But a lot of people still crazy with the willing, they want to go out, they want to go traveling. So sometimes I think now in China, it seems the people totally forget about what will happen on internet. Like today, I have a walk. They want me to have a meeting in another city, but I say it's not very necessary, because I'm a little bit busy in this week. So I said, we can do the internet meeting if you need me. But they insist I come personally, because they just want to see me sitting there and talk with them. So it's quite interesting that here, like everyone just want to ignore like the Zoom meeting or Tencent meeting or everything meeting on internet. They just want to see you in live. Yeah, just share with you this.
Yeah, I can relate. I think this. We need a Zoom past for a while. Oh, how about Stefan? After this meeting, 100% what OpenScape 2.0 is going to be, right?
Yes.
Super clear. Fantastic.
0.0. 0.0. No, I mean, it's quite interesting what Xian said, and for me, there's a big link between what Xian just said and what Shiva said earlier, is that in the beginning, we tried to deploy a tool that would be more like, emulating reality, and then we went back to the Zoom format. So we tried to, I think, maybe I see it as a fond memory, but also as an encouragement or hope for what's coming next. that we've been trying to hack our way through this. Sometimes we were successful doing it, sometimes less successful. I think the question of the time zone was something that eventually we failed because Pacific Ocean is so big. The question of the language also, we try to move away from English because it's the language of power, and we failed there, but we managed with the money, as Shiva said. I remember one very important meeting about political correctness. We managed to hack the Zoom via Tencent to broadcast it to Chinese practitioners that would not have access. So I guess OpenScape 2.0 is we are going to be personal practice of hacking the system, also hacking the institution. And if I refer back to what I said between network of solidarity and network of necessity, when I kind of want to speak for Boris at Réseau, who really supported the project from the beginning, and Cécile, without whom we would not have been able to go that far, and all of you partners, of course. But for me, it was a network of necessity. I needed to be with the rest of the world in a way. I needed to allow the rest of the world to be with me, and to do that, I used a network of solidarity that was implemented in Switzerland. So I think it's a bit this movement between both and how you hack the one to the others without being disrespectful or unlawful, or don't need to be crooks to do that. But I guess that's this hacking and maybe the necessity will be again more visible soon. Or maybe we just develop this, we hack our own practice to be in a mental place that we are concerned in the first degree, and we don't just do that for the others. Maybe more selfish in our generosity in a way.
Okay, so I think there's 20 more minutes to our 2-hour mark. I think it's safe enough to wrap it up, unless someone wants to open new kind of worms of question. No, just me. Tayyip, thanks so much, everyone. This has been great. I mean, I'm talking about 2 years that I think are one, but also now. Stefan, we're gonna do the debriefing with live with flowers, so that's gonna be great. Yikai and Sandra, thanks so much for joining. And yeah, Stefan, I feel you need to do the closing remark. What the hell am I doing?
Okay, I will close.
Thank you.
By saying thank you, and may we continue to be together, to find ways of being together, in person or not. And yeah, I should stop here because I think it was very nice. But yeah, let's not forget that we reacted and now we can act. So thank you, Rafat.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sandra,
Shiva,
Yikai, and if you want to say something.
and
It's
thank you,
yours,
Boris.
but yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.